Welcome in. Thanks so much for joining me. So in this episode, I'd like to explore and unpack one of the main teachings of the Buddha called the Four Noble Truths. And for some of you who are new to this, I'm going to introduce some core Buddhist principles. And for some of you who are sort of old hats and been practicing Buddhism for a while, hopefully you can still find some gems here as a long-time Buddhist practitioner. The Four Noble Truths are just something I continually come back to, even if I study or work with sort of quote-unquote more advanced teachings in Tibetan or Himalayan Buddhism. For me, I really see the Four Noble Truths as a thread throughout all of the teachings. So they're not something I think to be taken lightly or discarded. I believe there's something to circle back to or spiral back to again and again. Also, there is a way to work with these Four Noble Truths in what we call all three yanas of Himalayan Buddhism, the Shravakyana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana. There's a way to relate to them. In this episode, I'm going to talk more about them in the form of relating to the Shravakyana, a little bit in Mahayana. And we'll go from there. Most of all, I'd like to actually present these two in a way that we can work with on a daily basis, where they don't have to become sort of far off and lofty, philosophical or spiritual ideas. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump in. So I'll just name them to start, and there's many sort of ways to label or name them, but basically they are the truth of dukkha, the truth of the cause, the truth of cessation, and the truth of the path. Right? And I'll do that again. The truth of dukkha, or often that's translated as suffering or dissatisfaction. The truth of the cause, the truth of cessation, and the truth of the path. And the story goes basically that the Buddha, after attaining enlightenment, he was wandering and was eventually requested to teach by some of his earlier spiritual friends. And these became the Buddha's first disciples. And in the stories of the Buddha, this was the first teaching he gave as the Buddha, as the awakened one. And really, as I said, everything is encapsulated here. So the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha, is more than just a statement. It's actually, in my experience, it's a request, a prompt, an invitation to look into life. And so I'm using this word dukkha on purpose because dukkha is a really difficult Pali and Sanskrit word to translate directly into one English term. I talk about it a lot in various content, so you can find more on it as well, some of my videos and podcasts. But more or less, some people translate dukkha as suffering, pain, dissatisfaction. I've seen people translate it as stress. So again, it's everything that we find uncomfortable, from like really, large experiences of uncomfort, like, cutting our leg, or being sick, to small, dissatisfaction we have of not getting what we want, or getting what we want and it changes, or something not going our way, or just feeling not at ease. This is all dukkha. And actually, it's only the first type of dukkha. There's two more types that are more subtle, called the dukkha of change, and the what we call pervasive or all-pervasive dukkha, which is a little bit more involved because it involves basically all of life. So dukkha can be a challenging topic when we're new to Buddhism because it can sound very pessimistic or fatalistic. But in actuality, it's more like a doctor pointing out an issue that needs to be taken care of, right? So, a skilled doctor, when there's something we can do about a problem, they're going to give us something to do about that. But they need to point out, via tests, diagnosis, etc., that something's happening in the first place, and specifically what it is. And this is really what dukkha is. It's not saying things are doomed and, awful all the time. It's saying that there's a fundamental misconception happening around how we relate to self and the world around us. And this is causing a bind that causes stress and dissatisfaction. And then, of course, leads to deeper forms of physical and psychological pain. So that leads to the second noble truth where, a good doctor will point out there's a cause, right? There's a cause for the dukkha. There's a cause for that dissatisfaction and stress. And mainly in traditional Buddhism, the cause is karma, cause and effect, and afflictive emotion, right? Or destructive emotions, or destructive forms of psychology. So the karma, cause, and effect one, again, a very deep dive, but I'm just sort of briefly touching on these, giving an overview. But I hope an overview that helps to bring more depth and meaning. That's also the point here. And karma, cause, and effect is a big one. Karma is one of these words or terms that also I feel gets quite misinterpreted in the modern world, because some people take it to mean some sort of fixed belief or idea, or something like fate, right? But karma is not fate. It's not like written into stone that this is definitely going to happen to you, and just accept it and get over it. In some Asian Buddhist cultures, it can actually be helpful, where people sometimes can accept something that's happening to them, just thinking, okay, it's my karma. And that can be helpful in some instances to kind of release any further stress around it. But in some ways, it's actually quite harmful, because a lot of things can be changed, and we can actually augment the karma. We can transform karma. We can purify karma. Some karma will happen, meaning the karma, and karma here just means action. Sorry, I should have said that. It means the initial action of body, speech, and mind that we took that has a ripple effect, right? And so just like any ripple effect, even if it's just dropping a rock or a pebble into a pond, it's affected by what's around it. It's not just the pebble hitting the water. It's the rocks on the bottom of the water. It's the temperature. It's the consistency of the water. What else is in and around it? That's going to affect the ripples. So this is a lot like karma. It's an interwoven vast web that is not material, that exists in each of our minds, that we affect in each and every moment via what we think, what we say, and how we act, right? So karma is those moments of action, essentially. But as I said, it's a little bit more than that, because it's also the web or the weave of what we've enacted. And this creates kind of an impression on us. It creates it's not really a personality, but a way of being, sets of behaviors and habits. And I think, whether you believe in karma moving from life to life or not, you can see that's happening. When we develop a habit and we reinforce it and we feed it, that's what happens. It continues to be that way until we change something. So karma is a subset of cause and effect, just that things are in relationship, that any action or cause is going to have an effect, and that effect is going to have a further cause. So this is a recognition of what is actually influencing the dissatisfaction, the stress, the suffering, the dukkha that we experience, right? And on top of that, what fuels karma, what creates karma, is actions done because we act out of a certain kind of afflictive emotion. So namely, these afflictive emotions we put into a category of 5, though there's more than that, but the main 5 are ignorance or misperception, clinging, or we sometimes say attachment, but I usually use the word clinging, aggression or aversion, jealousy and pride. And jealousy and pride are forms of attachment and aversion, but they're a little different. But the main 3 are misperception or ignorance, clinging, and aversion. And then we add on jealousy and pride. But there's many different kinds of destructive thoughts and emotions that come out of those 5. But really, those are the main ones that we work with. And I think some of those we can see already. They're destructive. We can see how aggression and anger, aversion are destructive, because if we act out of aversion, we can harm ourselves, we can harm others. Attachment is a little more difficult to see because it feels good in the moment, but it's sticky. It's like putting our hand in glue. It's just really difficult to get out of that. And then at some point we want to get out, but we can't because we're attached, right? Ignorance is even more subtle because it's a misperception happening about ourselves and others that is the cause of the other afflictive emotions. So in Buddhism, we mainly work with remedying the cause of misperception through meditation, through understanding, through trying to look at how we view self and life and the world around us. And through doing that, we can slowly release these other afflictive emotions. And when we can cut through these other afflictive emotions, we can actually change our habits and eventually cease to create karma. Of course, we still do things, we still function in the world, we still help, we still serve, but we do it from a basis of non-dual compassion. That's what a bodhisattva and a Buddha does, more or less. So that's the understanding of sort of the dissatisfaction, which we can go into, we can contemplate on the cause of it. And then the third one is that there's a cessation that we can, through understanding, through the fourth noble truth of the path, we can remedy the causes of dukkha, and we can attain a type of cessation of dukkha, which otherwise is known as, awakening, realization. There's all sorts of levels of that in traditional Buddhism, from the bodhisattva paths and bhumis all the way to Buddhahood or full awakening. Yeah. And full awakening is not some godlike state, even though, of course, there can be some mystical experiences around that. But more or less, it is the cessation of a misperception that causes suffering. It's the cessation of creating karma, cause and effect. And then at the same time, because of that, all these wonderful, amazing qualities come out where we can benefit others through the power and compassion of being an awakened being. So that happens more or less, that cessation happens through the path, through the fourth noble truth. And so there's many presentations of the path. In the Theravada tradition, they have the Eightfold Path. And in the Mahayana tradition, we subsume that into three. And those three are discipline, meditation, and wisdom, more or less, or we could say insight. Yeah. So discipline, meditation, and insight. Sometimes people translate the first one, Shila, as ethics. I prefer the word discipline because it's a little more accurate in how we practice it. And it doesn't mean being disciplined. It means attending with mindfulness to our conduct, right? Being mindful of our conduct, being disciplined around how we work with our body, speech, and mind, how we're aware of that, and how we work with our afflictive emotions, right? Because initially we need to remedy the afflictive emotions. We need to notice them and prevent them from proliferating, right? And so we do this through Shila or discipline. But without meditative awareness, the second one, Samadhi, without that, it's very difficult because our mind is untrained. It's like, it's like a wild elephant running everywhere, and we need to train and tame it through meditation. Third, meditation isn't, both Shila and Samadhi, or discipline and meditation, aren't enough in and of themselves. We need to have some kind of practice, some kind of way to cut through the misperception itself, the misperception of who and what we think we are, who and what we think the world is around us, and of course, how we work with our afflictive emotions and thoughts. And so we do that mainly through what's called Vipassana or insight meditation. And there's many styles. That's not a singular thing. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of Vipassana meditation. We just learn, obviously, we can learn a couple, learn the main ones, whatever lineage we're in. And that leads to prajna, right? And so prajna can be on many different levels. There can be insight into impermanence. Prajna can translate as insight. It can sometimes translate as wisdom, depending on the context. And more or less, prajna is the insight that helps us to cut through our misperceptions, right? It helps us to cut through anything that's causing us dissatisfaction, stress, and pain. So really, the whole Buddhist path is there to help us to have more prajna, to sort of funnel us into more insight. And insight is different than a thought. It's different than an emotion. It's this magic of mind of seeing the truth, right? Of seeing how something actually is, which then transforms our conduct and transforms our relationship to dukkha, to the causes of it, to how we create it, to how we reinforce it. So that's been a key thing in sort of my understanding of this is sort of we're really going for a truth. We're not going for some sort of idea, belief, concept, big meditation state or emotional experience. It's really about a truth that we see through Vipassana meditation that we cannot unsee. A truth, and again, for most of us, these build up as small truths we see in short moments, but eventually they grow into larger truths that transform us. And more or less, we're talking about the truth of shunyata, which is the truth of all things being interdependent and therefore unfindable, but at the same time magically displaying. And so for a practitioner who's able to experience that more and more, they're easily able to cut through afflictive emotions eventually. Not right away. That takes some practice, but eventually they can. So this is the path. This is the truth of the path. Now, one question is you could ask us, why are these truths, right? And these are truths just in the sense that they are something for us to explore. They're from the First Noble Truth onwards, there's something for us to again, I said an invitation. There's something for us to contemplate, to think about. Most of us do have to put some time, some energy into studying them. It's not like we can just be like, oh yeah, I know what they're talking, what the Buddha was talking about. Probably it's not going to happen that way. We need to put some time into study, into understanding. This is just sort of a brief unpacking of them. But I encourage you, if this is interesting to you, if this framing of how we can become free, how we can be more at ease is interesting to you, explore more. It's really, one of the most foundational teachings of Buddhism. And so there's a ton of studies we can do on this. Lots of amazing books in all different lineages of Buddhism. And there's also different approaches to how we work with the path, what we think of as cessation. That can be a little bit different depending on the lineage. But either way, it doesn't matter too much in the beginning. Just dive in, see what resonates. And my main advice here, as far as for practice, is, with the path, we're working with the discipline of mindful conduct, noticing what is causing harm, what is benefiting, what is causing harm, and trying to increase what benefits, trying to reduce what creates harm for ourselves and others. And meditation, working on basic, fundamental, present moment awareness, just being, and training in that every day a little bit. Along with that, the First Noble Truth is really powerful. And again, it's not just about, having a conceptual confidence in the First Noble Truth. Just like investigating the world and saying, oh yeah, there's suffering. Okay, yeah, there is. That's not that transformative. We have to look at it in our own life. We have to look how it manifests in the corners and the dark spaces of our life, and how it pervades our life. Again, not as a pessimistic thing, but as something we can see, so we develop a strong wish to change that, to transform that through the path. Otherwise, what happens is we end up reinforcing the habits that cause dukkha. So actually, seeing dukkha, looking at it more and more in its different forms and subtleties, we can actually transform it. That's what I think is very unique about the First Noble Truth. It's almost like some of the other Noble Truths function via what we see, the insights we have into dukkha when we're working with it. Now, of course, there's not much we can do about certain physical pain other than, medicine and, taking care and, being healthy. We should do that. But inevitably, our bodies are impermanent. And so they're going to age, and eventually all of us have to die. No one's figured that out yet, like how to not die. But there's lots of ways we can work with dukkha that are much more subtle than that, and that we can change. And at the end of the day, it's not really about finding a utopian perfection that has no dukkha. It's about understanding the nature of life and the truth of shunyata through looking at dukkha. That's really a key point. Sometimes we can miss, because when we're functionalizing these things, we can often have this goal. Okay, well, if I look at dukkha, and if I'm thinking about and contemplating it, and I'm trying to remedy it, that means it should go away. I think it's a little more nuanced than that. Yes, some of it can be remedied, and mostly like how we think, how we act, how we work with our emotions, that can be remedied. Um, but at the same time, how do you say it? There's some things that are inevitable in life, and we can have much more ease around those. There's a benefit to that. But I think the real benefit is in seeing what dukkha actually is. The I know for me, some of the things that caused me a lot of stress and dissatisfaction, even just 5 or 10 years ago, they've changed. Like those don't cause me the same amount of dissatisfaction. So we can see some of the dukkha is kind of suspect, right? Right? I'm not saying it doesn't cause you pain or stress or any of that, but the point is to free ourselves, to loosen, to open, right? So just something in there, some tips for when you're working with dukkha, and it does need to be studied, because especially the dukkha of change and the all pervasive dukkha, they're not so obvious, and that's really, for me as a meditator, that's where the gems are at, because the dukkha of change is happening all the time, right? It doesn't mean things are changing. The dukkha of change means more or less how we cling to pleasure and pain, right? How we work with fear and expectation. So when we can work with that and open that up, we can start to live with much more compassion and openness towards ourselves and others. So just a few key points here. There's much, much more, obviously. I just wanted to name a few key points around Shila, around meditation or samadhi, and then, working with the First Noble Truth. That's the entrance point. That opens the door. And as I said, it's something I continually come back to over the years. So thanks so much. I hope this brief unpacking of the Four Noble Truths has been helpful for you. As always, reach out and let me know. Feel free to comment here on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on my podcast, please reach out at scotttusa.com. Send me a message. And wishing you all the best on your path. And I hope you can continue to explore these Four Noble Truths, and that they'll be very fruitful for you in your life. Thanks so much.